Hola, me llamo Klaus, and here is my portfolio número uno para español 104. First off, we have the palabras section, which I mistakenly started doing just by modulo because I read the organization by alphabetical afterwards. I apologize for that. For portfolio 2 and 3, I will have it alphabetically, but I just wanted to still show you that I have all of the words. Here, starting, we have, like, for modulo 13, like the elementos naturales, verbos, adjectivos, comidas, adjectivos más. There are a lot of adjectives in 13. Personas, sustantivos, and then next here we have the palabras from modulo 14, which is a lot about la naturaleza. Verbos again, la ciudad, nombres, adjetivos, adverbios, more of those, some objetos, and a lot of comida. In my portfolio, I've been keeping some of the, some ways to write down and just remind myself of the other assignments we've been doing in the class, like palabras favoritos. I wrote a few sentences that I then used, as my base for my video responses. So that's my palabras section for portfolio 1. And again, I apologize, next for portfolio 2, I'll have it all organized by letter, like it should be. Awesome. Next up, we have the estructura section, which wrote down a lot of the stuff that we talked about in these, which is starting with the adverbial clauses with subjunctive. Here you can see all the different phrases that are really important, like a condición que, a menos que. I tried to note some of the important things, like the specific things, like, when you can use like a verb not in the subjunctive but an infinitive, for example. And then it really helps me when I have like these charts for the verb endings. It's always like the way I think about it in my head, so it really helps to show how the different ways that the words are going to end, especially here when you use subjunctive, sometimes indicative, sometimes verbial clauses. It's really helpful for me. And then I have an example there as well. Here I have some more examples, and then just some more expressions and verbs, just kind of as examples. And then at the bottom here, I'm talking about like expressions of doubt and denial, and an example that really helps clear out both seeing a Spanish example and then having the translation. Also here, I did a big old chart of all the important expressions of doubt and the ones that you need to think about that are really commonly used, like dudar, es dudoso, all of those things. Here, again, I like to write down the things I learned. I did a little summary that helps me about the assignments, but also just as a summary in general, like after I finished the estructura, just a few sentences about, some of the grammar we learned and like the new things that we learned in general. Here in the estructura section, I just put it as a good place to, again, like put down some of my notes for the eloquismográficos. I thought it was best to keep all of my notes for all the class in my portfolio, even if it was, a little bit, some of it was a little bit less, particularly about the estructura. Here is for modulo 14. It starts out with the simple conditional. And this just talks about the simple conditional, the endings for conditional, which are really important, as we all know, because they're all the same. It talks about some of the irregulars, which are really important for the stems, because it has this, like, they're the imperfect irregulars. The stem is the most important thing. This page is all about different examples and situations where you can use the conditional, and then it starts out with the second use of the conditional, the hypothetical clauses. Has a few sentences just talking about like when you use what, and then the most important part of the conditional, kind of the C plus the indicative, the actual structure itself. On this guide, we have more examples, and then move into the conditional plus C plus the imperfect subjunctive, again having the way it's laid out, which is really important, and then a few examples. Here again is just my kind of like recording what I learned in Modulo 14, and then just some notes for my Kismografio. Just, I like writing in Spanish. It helps me when I write it and say it out loud. And so yeah, I just have that in here. Cool. All right, last but not least, we have the Vida section of my portfolio. And that starts out with Colombia. Here on this first page, we have a lot talking about just kind of some of the general characteristics, like the capital, the money, and some of the key things we talked about, like panelas, esmeraldas, sombreros vueltos, some of the key cultural and geographical things that we learned about in the module that are really important to know about Colombia. Also talks a little bit about Colombian people and some of the great places in Colombia itself. Next up, we just have more about the culture of Colombia, the famous peoples that we talked about, like Shakira, the artists that we talked about, and then here is some of my notes about the La Canción de Mando Flores, which is just really helpful for me to have in the portfolio, but also interesting to think about in terms of Colombian music. For Modulo 14, we talked a lot about Nicaragua, and again, I started out with that same, like here's some of the general information, really important things that you need to know about Nicaragua. Talked about some of the passions, particularly baseball, which was awesome because baseball is my favorite, and the city of Managua. Here's a whole page about some of the places, the lugares important in Nicaragua. Here's, just going more into the culture, like the food and the drink and the celebrations, which is always really important when you're learning a country. And then here are a lot of musicians and, just prominent people from Nicaragua, which are a lot more than I knew about, which is really interesting. And finally, we just have that one more important person. Just a lot of information about Nicaragua and Colombia and the life in those two countries. And at the front, I have my little quick guide to Spanish grammar in case I forget anything. So that's my portfolio numero uno.